Analysis machine, we're back on the clock.
Understood. Ready to resume duties.
Perfect. Requesting file 27-01-06.
Recognize. Joe Kido's data is being transferred.
Joe is the oldest member of the original Digidestined team, as well as the resident worrywart. He's pessimistic, complains a lot, and not exactly what you'd call the bravest of characters. So is his crest of reliability something of a mismatch? Hey guys, this is D Reaper, and today we're doing a character analysis on Joe Kido. We've got a lot to cover, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. This particular analysis holds some significance, because when we did the Choose Your Own Crest challenge, along with courage, the majority of true believers reported that the crest of reliability was their closest match. So for starters, let's define what reliability is, and as we analyze Joe, we can see if he measures up to the caliber of true believers. Analysis machine, can you help us define reliability?
Reliability refers to someone or something that is consistently good in quality or performance, worthy of being trusted, dependable, depended upon, and steadfast.
Thank you, Analysis Machine. Alright, let's look at Joe. One of the things we see early on is Joe's adapting a lot slower than most of the others. He seems the most skeptical of his destined partner than all the other kids, and he seems the least willing to accept the group's reality that they find themselves in, as he frequently tries to convince himself that he's just having a very long, convincing dream. When the team finds phone booths on the beach, after a few hours of them being in the digital world, the whole team is thrilled with seeing the first signs of human technology, and think perhaps this is their chance to contact home. However, after a brief interaction with the booths, the others quickly accept that although it looks familiar, these phones are about as alien as everything else in this world. But long after the others accept the truth and move on, Joe's still at it and willing to give up until he has dialed every number he knows, or until one goes through. So, not off to a great start. That is, of course, if you only focus on the negative, which is what Joe has a tendency of doing. But looking on the other side, we see even amidst their strange circumstance, Joe is still trying to maintain a sense of order, as he scolds Mimi for trying to shirk her duties and insists that she takes her turn carrying the supply bag, a system that was implemented while they were still in summer camp. He also tries to lead the others to safety when Shelma on attack.
Everybody, up here!
Albeit unsuccessfully. Even though they're in a fantastical situation, as the oldest, Joe still feels like he's responsible for the others, especially in the beginning of the journey. When Matt and Ty have their first big fight, Joe steps in and expertly diffuses the situation by validating and complimenting both sides, then suggesting positive ways that they can direct their abundance of testosterone by taking guard duty. Joe seems to see himself as the adult of the group. However, after time goes on, we see Joe begin to question his role amongst the other Digidestins, which is a journey that will encompass the majority of the series. We get the first hints of these happenings in episode 7, when we see Joe begin to crack under the weight of responsibility he's placed on himself. He's noticeably more agitated and easily riled up, so much so that the others notice the change in his behavior. It's during this time that Matt and Ty have their second big argument, where they're deciding whether or not to climb Infinity Mountain. As the two are getting worked up, Joe gets between them as he did before, and tries to resolve their conflict. But as stated in previous analyses, a lot of Ty and Matt's arguments are less about who's right and who's wrong, and closer to who's more right or who's less wrong. Seeing the value in both sides, Joe struggles to find a resolution. As the two apply more pressure, Joe ends up getting just as worked up as they are, and Sora ends up intervening, calling out all three of them. Joe takes this extremely hard. Never did he imagine trying to be the voice of reason would amount in him being counted as part of the problem. He spent the remainder of the evening in his head wondering if he's not in fact the voice of reason and mediator of the group, then what exactly is his purpose? He reminds himself that he has to be the responsible one, because their lives are in his hands. And he comes to the conclusion that by climbing an Infinity Mountain himself, he can bring a resolution to the suspended conflict, by both removing the uncertainty of the danger and sparing the younger kids the trek to appease Matt, as well as making a path forward and getting the lay of the land to appease Ty. Still under the burden of his sense of responsibility, Joe sneaks off in the dead of night to accomplish this task, but he's annoyed when Gomamon joins him. When he sees ditching Gomamon will be more trouble than it's worth, he begrudgingly accepts his company. As the two spend the rest of the night climbing, we see Joe at last fully open up to Gomamon, and finally accepts him as a partner. But just as they're closing in on their moment of triumph, they get attacked by Unimon. Backup arrives just in time, but with Unimon's air superiority and home field advantage, the group is quickly backed into a corner. It's here that Joe jumps onto the unicorn's back and attempts to physically pull the black gear from the monster's back. Let me take a moment to acknowledge how absolutely courageous this act is. Although Joe is probably the most skittish person in the group, you'd be surprised to see how often he swallows his fears to take action, especially when it falls under what he perceives is within his line of duty. Even before Unimon's attack, when the mountain splits open revealing it's housing dozens of black gears, meaning Matt and Beelmon's caution of the mountain was likely warranted, Joe simply declares that there's no turning back now, as the two proceed to continue their climb. But let's get back to Joe's stallion wrangling. As he's holding on for dear life, Joe's chanting to himself that he has to be positive, and using positive self-talk, somewhat acknowledging his typical negative attitude and belief in the power of positive thinking, or perhaps mind over matter, you could say.
To think positive! I'm responsible! I've got to do it!
Joe pulling at the gear appears to be causing Unimon a great deal of pain, and the seizing horse bucks Joe off of him. Fortunately, Gomamon digivolves into Ikakumon, just in time to catch him, and with his help, they're able to free Unimon from the black gear spell. In the aftermath of the fight, Gomamon tries to keep up he and Joe's frenemies routine, but Joe brushes Gomamon's comment aside to embrace a true partnership. And even though they don't really find the answers that they were expecting atop the mountain, Joe comments that they learned a lot on the way up. In Joe's case, likely that he doesn't have to shoulder all the responsibility of the group alone, as this is the last time that we see him attempting to do so. But his journey to find his purpose in the group has only just begun. We can observe Joe hit another bump in the road when the group is separated by Devimon, and he and Gomamon are left drifting in the ocean on a makeshift bed raft. Joe is losing it, and Gomamon's lackadaisical attitude is only exacerbating the situation. Things get worse when Ogremon attacks, and the two are forced to retreat. It might have been curtains for the two of them, had they not been reeled in by Sora, who happened to be fishing nearby. While Joe is still unconscious, Gomamon tells the others that he's worried that the series of events might have badly damaged Joe's confidence, and suggests that they make him their leader as a confidence boost, which the others oblige. And it becomes evident that Joe might not be cut out to be a team leader. After Joe stops floundering, he begins acting like what he believes being a leader entails, as he leads the others in an army-style march to survey the surrounding area. As the night goes on, he starts lashing out at the others for making suggestions saying that he's the leader, so what he says goes. As he begins to go on a bit of a power trip, the small group realizes they might have accidentally created a monster. And when trouble rolls around, in spite of his frequent declarations, he has to be reminded that as leader, it should be his job to investigate the issue. Although Joe's short-lived leadership role was filled with more blunder than success, he did manage to pull things together as he devised a mind over matter exercise to help Birdramon and Ikakumon overcome Bakumon in a fight. And overall, this experience seemed to provide the confidence boost Joe needed to get back on track as they prepare to confront Devimon. Joe remains consistent through the Edamon arc, but besides his witty comments,
what do you think Genai meant when he said we weren't taking proper care of our Digimon?
I don't know. We've done everything but give him an allowance.
there's not too much to note until he and Gomamon are scammed into working at Digitamomon's diner. This whole situation is a reminder of how hopeless Joe can be sometimes. Not only are Joe and Gomamon basically in an endless loop of indentured servitude, Joe seems all but resigned to his fate before Matt arrives to give him a hand. Furthermore, even though Joe is being sabotaged in the background, Joe himself is extremely accident prone, especially when under pressure, making him twice as easy to dupe. However, during the big confrontation with the crooked diner owners, Joe proves once more that he can be counted on when the chips are down, as he, for the second time, jumps on the back of an attacking champion level Digimon, this time to save TK from Vegemon. Though Vegemon is wringing him like a sponge, Joe urges Ikakumon to help Garurumon in his fight, assuring the others that he's fine. It really does speak to the caliber of Joe's character, when he's able to put others first even when he's experiencing a great deal of pain, which I might add, Joe happens to be allergic to. And after going through all that, he's not even expecting an apology from Matt, who falsely accused him of purposely sabotaging the group. Later on, after the group is united, Joe's the first to endorse Tai as the official leader of the group. And from what we already know about Joe, this is huge. For starters, we know on some level Joe saw himself as something akin to the leader of the group, being the oldest, which Joe marks as quite significant, as well as being the most serious and practical. As he states, this is what it means to be responsible for the entire group, including being responsible for their safety and well-being. This is something that Joe takes very seriously, and we witness what the weight of that burden was doing to his psyche. For Joe to be the first to promote Tai, not only does that mean relinquishing what he believed was his role, it's also a showing of humility, as Joe learned both on Infinity Mountain and on the island with the Bakumon that being a leader comes with a myriad of unforeseen challenges, and he admits with no hesitation that his junior is the one who's most suitable for the job. When we return to the real world, we learn a little about Joe's family dynamics, which gives us a little more insight on why Joe behaves the way he does. Joe comes from a family of doctors, and the expectation is that he too will become one in the future. And it is implied that Joe really doesn't have much of a say in the matter. This might be why Joe is always putting so much pressure on himself, because he's already used to others putting pressure on him. Speaking of, we actually see it in some of Joe's internal dialogue, that he actually does think that the other Digidestineds have these grandiose expectations for him, which is more serious in the early part of the series, and more comical near the series end. But since Reaper sees this as more of a serious topic, let's take a moment to talk about Great Expectations. No, we're not talking about AP English. Analysis machine, less trolling please.
Apologies.
Alright, so oftentimes someone having high expectations for you is a very good thing. After all, usually if someone is expecting great things from you, that means they believe that you can do those things. Or in other words, they have faith in you. The most straightforward example being a parent wanting their child to succeed. However, it can be a problem when those expectations eclipse the foundation of said relationship, or if the final version of said expectations don't align with those of whom is expected. If you happen to have great expectations for someone, that's wonderful, but do be sure that the aspirations of those who you believe in also share your passion. Otherwise, you might be surprised to learn that you are unintentionally harming someone whom you wish only good for. It might sometimes be necessary to revise those expectations to find a middle ground that's close aligned with said person of interest. If you happen to be the subject of said expectations, it's important to understand that this is typically coming from a good place. Nonetheless, if those expectations don't fall in line with what you want to do, it's best not to let it consume you, otherwise you might end up feeling lost, confused, and unfulfilled. It might be necessary to initiate the communication with this certain someone, so they know how you feel. Because too often, people can get so caught up in knowing what's best that they forget what's healthy. This is actually an elaboration of the advice Joe gets from his older brother, Jim. Jim actually thrives from the pressure his parents put on him. That's because Jim's greatest aspiration is to become a doctor and help others. But even in his own situation, Jim wants to be a doctor in his own way, which is somewhat different than his parents' vision. Jim tells Joe that he thinks Joe would be a great doctor, but it's something that he has to decide for himself that he wants to do. He even encourages him to talk to their parents if he isn't sure. Along with many of the other interim issues we see the kids face outside of the digital world, we don't actually get a definitive conclusion to this conflict. But as Joe listens to Jim's advice with a mixed look of patience and apprehension, we realize that there's probably a lot more going on in Joe's mind at any given time than he lets on. It also provides a clear window with Joe's relationship with his older brother. At first, Jim seems like kind of a jerk teasing Joe, and may come off as the typical mean older brother. But when he's speaking with Joe with concern, while still being upfront, you can tell that the two have an honest communication link going, and that's something that can't be established without a lot of trust. In the chaos caused by Mayotasmon, Joe and TK end up stuck on the harbor, unable to cross to the opposite shore, where Mayotasmon is wreaking havoc. It looks like smooth sailing when the two decide to ride Ikakumon across the river. That is until they discover Mega Seedramon is blocking the way. When he attacks Ikakumon, the two are thrown into the water, and neither of them know how to swim very well. Joe quickly grabs a piece of debris, pulls TK out of the water, and places him on it. Joe barely has a few seconds to tell TK that he can't let anything happen to him, since TK is just a kid, and he's responsible for him. He then sinks into the water. This act shows the depth of Joe's conviction as a responsible party, putting the lives of others above his own due to his duty. This action causes his crest to glow, and the two are saved by Zudamon when Kakumon digivolves. Joe is a pretty upstanding guy, and by now he has a pretty consistent streak of being reliable. But one common pattern that we see with the group is the others making light of Joe, especially when he's trying to be assertive. One of the best examples of this occurs right before the team returns to the digital world after defeating Venom Mayotasmon. When Jim comments how unsettling it is knowing that the fate of the world is in the hands of a bunch of kids, Joe responds knowing that Jim is trying to encourage them in his own way. He declares fiercely that he will make sure that the sun rises in the morning, implying that he will keep the end of the world at bay, where he's instantly patronized by Sora and Mimi before accidentally stumbling into the digital portal. I emphasize this to point out Joe is still treated this way even late in the series, and though it may seem like the other kids are just being big meanies, it's not exactly without merit. Joe is very negative, even downright pessimistic at times, and he's constantly complaining. With that in mind, it doesn't feel too harsh to make a wise comment at the guy who says they're willing to walk 1,000 miles to reach their goal 1 minute, then complain about the blisters on their feet the next. But I do believe this attitude from the group may have played a role in one of Joe's future decisions, But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Not long after Metal Siegramon is defeated, Mimi hits her breaking point and resigns from the group, unable to fight any longer. Joe volunteers to go along with her, for no other reason besides knowing she will be in more danger if she's left on her own. And he's correct. Just because Mimi refuses to fight doesn't mean their enemies will give her a pass. When Mimi asks Joe if he thinks she was being selfish, Joe tells her he actually thinks she was being very brave by speaking out, and wishes he could be more like her in that way. He says this as we see him reflecting on the conversation he had with Jim. While separated from the group, the two are attacked by both Puppetmon and Metal Edamon. When the two find a wounded Ogremon helpless in the woods, Joe has every mind of leaving their old enemy to his fate. But after some coaxing from Mimi, Joe decides to use his medical knowledge to patch him up. Though the others are impressed by Joe, he claims all he did was the most basic first aid for Ogremon. Still, it seems that the act of helping someone in need, with the knowledge that he obtained through his studies, helps to nudge Joe along the path of medicine. It's only after Joe is assured Mimi will be safe that Joe departs on his own journey of self-discovery. As mentioned near the beginning of the analysis, Joe spends most of the series wondering what his role is. Joe even compares his journey to Matt, but honestly this comparison is horribly inaccurate, and also totally on brand for Joe. But ever the faithful companion, Goemon accompanies Joe on his vague quest. When he finds Matt at the opportune time to bring him back to the group, he sees this as a sign that he did the right thing. And this is further reinforced when he's able to assist Matt in helping Sora when she's being consumed by darkness, letting her know she doesn't have to bear the weight of the world on her own, something he learned early in his journey. Satisfied, Joe believes he has grown into a person that the team can rely on, and is ready to join the team for the final fight. But in reality, Joe has been this person for quite some time. Through his journey, we see Joe can be trusted to make himself small so others have a chance to grow, consistently puts his life on the line to protect his friends, and remains a steadfast figure in the group that the others come to depend on. I guess that's what they call him, Reliable Joe. Hey guys, this is D Reaper Post Credits, and if you made it this far, we just want to say thank you for watching. So, what did you think of our analysis? Personally, Joe is one of my favorite Digimon characters, and there's a lot left unsaid in this character analysis that we'll probably save for the Partner Dynamics video. But Joe's also an important character, because as said before, 26% of the true believers voted their crest aligned most closely with Joe. So let us know with your expert opinion, do you believe Joe is worthy of his nickname Reliable Joe? Tell us about it in the comment section. And while you're down there, if you do us a solid and like the video, it'd be greatly appreciated. But that's gonna do it for me. My name is D Reaper, and I'm a YouTuber for fun. Today's challenge, be yourself. Good luck, and we'll see you all in the next one.